what would a question be if I'm testing my own kind of relationship with money? What's a question or two I would ask myself?
Yeah. So, all right. So I want to get back to the second question, what would be a question to test yourself with in a second. The first thing I want to note is that it's not, I don't always get into the more esoteric elements of our relationship with money, what it is really, right? Like the fact that it really is just energy, and it truly is a currency, right? It's something that can flow to and from, and that it's actually our ability to sort of open up the channels of our own creativity. And
I love that, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have, in all of the work that I've done, what you just said, currency as in current and energy. I mean, it's interesting. I've not heard that before, as much work as I've done, but that's awesome. So I just wanted to shine a light on that for everybody, is you can't step over that. That is currency as in current. I love that. Good job. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's a golden nugget, right? And I think it is a beautiful touch point when you're getting stuck in, when you're really feeling the blockage, right? You think about like, how does energy flow? It has to move. And when we are tight and restrictive, even in our thinking about money, it blocks that ability to flow. And that's what money wants, is to be in motion. So you asked the question, like, what would somebody ask to test their relationship with money? And it's quite common when I first start working with a rising gen client in one of the client families I'll work with, and I'll say, what do you like? How would you characterize your relationship with money? And generally the first response is this look of confusion, like, relationship with money, what does that even mean? I don't know. Like you have to define that for me. And what I mean is, like, we are always in some kind of dance. It's like it is I don't want to say it's a person, because we do too much anthropomorphizing it as it is, but it takes up space, right? Money does, or it certainly can. And one of the things I'll ask is, okay, so if you think about how you feel when you are interacting with it, sort of your data, like when are the points that you kind of intersect with money, whether it's transactions, or whether it's reconciling your books, or whether it's thinking about an opportunity, a business opportunity that's coming, or it slipped through your fingers. Like, all of those are moments of interacting with money conceptually. And when you think of that, do you feel like you're in the most loving, supportive relationship that you could ever imagine? Or do you feel like you're kind of in a sometimes good, sometimes shady relationship that maybe is a little tingy abusive, and maybe sometimes a little dysfunctional, right? Like, do you feel like you can really sort of lean back and trust it? Or do you feel like, yeah, I got to be on guard, I got to get what's mine? And all of that is our relationship with it. That is how we bring, that's who we bring to that relationship, is that it's either like the best, most unconditional, beautiful version of ourselves, or it's the part of us that's defensive and not maybe not the best partner in a relationship.
Well, it's interesting, right, that you use that in the context of relationship, because certainly we have we see, and I know in my own growth over the years, relationship with money is, you mentioned it earlier on about scarcity, not enough to go around. Or to your point, it's an abusive relationship, as in you got to work harder, you're not working hard enough, or you don't deserve more, you aren't worth more. And I mean, those are all actually, that is your value that you place on yourself is also related to the relationship that you have with money, and how you see it flows, and how you see your own value. And so it's interesting that when you kind of shine a light on these little subtle stories, this little subtle BS that we have with ourselves, it really does manifest as in often either a lack or money coming in and money going, and value, I'm not worth that much. Then all of a sudden you lose it, all those psychological kind of things. Can you go back a little bit, Kristin, in that after your husband kind of shone a light on it for you, you mentioned that you did a lot of work over the years. What would some example of a lot of work mean in changing your relationship with money?
Yeah. So I started reading some books that helped give me a new perspective. One of them was The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist, which is I think just a fabulous way to sort of take a step out of what we typically think of the role that money should have and think about it differently. The other one was by George Kinder, and it's 7 Stages of Money Maturity. And then there was actually, I'm looking at my shelf to see if I can see it, because it was really quite beneficial. I may have to get it for you later because I can't think of the name of it right now. But I could get it to you later and we could put it in the show notes. It was because it really took a spiritual look at money. And that gave me this whole other perspective altogether about like just thinking about what did I think of money from a more spiritual, energetic place. And that was really helpful. So first I read, and then I started really paying attention to my behaviors around it. So at that time, I was, like I said, I was in my accounts every day. I was sort of looking at inflows and outflows, and I thought like I had to manage it. I had to control it. And there is definitely a healthy way to make sure that you are paying attention, right? Like not paying attention to your inflows and outflows is not healthy. It's not being in a healthy relationship with money either. It's being very detached, but always sort of like being in it and down to the penny, and like just that, like I could feel the tension of being like watching my bank, my bank accounts go down as the business wasn't taking off as fast as I thought, and I was still living on savings. And what I decided to do, I realized like what a place of scarcity I was living in. And so there's a couple things that I did. One thing that I did proactively that really helped, and then another little moment that just showed up that really was that I'll tell you about in a minute. But one of the things I did was I recognized that I was bringing tension to every time I thought about money. And so I thought, you know what? I need to change the way that I need to be ready and be intentional when I'm going to sit down and interact with my accounts, reconcile. And so instead of being in it every day, I was living on I had a budget. I was adhering to my budget. So I was like, things were not going to go off the rails in a month. And I was like, once a month, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to reconcile my books. But before I sit down to do that, I am going to light a candle. I'm going to say the prayer of thanks for all that for the awesome townhome I was living in, for the warmth I had, for the food that was in my fridge, for all the things that the inflow, as small as it seemed at that time, but that the inflow was allowing me to have, and all the lessons I was learning, that growing up a kid of quite a bit of privilege, I never thought about money. I never worried about food. I didn't think about how I was going to pay for school. I didn't question that I was going to have a car when I turned 16, right? Like I didn't have a really concrete relationship with money. And this process was providing me the opportunity to build that. And it was painful at first, but I was learning that I could transition it to being something that wasn't painful. And so I got very intentional. I lit a candle. I had gratitude for all that I had. And then I would go in and I would reconcile. And when I saw money going out, I would note how it was being paid to something that aligned with my values, right? Even if it was like paying the credit card bill, it was like, yeah, I value being someone who's debt free. So this is what I am doing, is I am making sure I'm taking care of my debts and not letting them pile up. And And then I would, even if it felt so measly, the income coming in, I would reconcile it and I would bless it and say thank you. And then I would close my books down and blow out the candle and move away from the desk and move on to something else. And it was a very intentional practice of be in the right mental place, be ready to actually pay attention to all that is great and good and happening for you right now, and then be done, and then move on and go interact with the world and with life. And I will say that, I mean, it took some time for that shift to start to really feel like it was showing up in my daily life. But I noticed that then when I was going to the grocery store and spending money, which used to feel so tight, it was like, I didn't want it. Like, I didn't want to be, it was always just this like, oh, I know I have to, but like, I don't want to spend that money. And instead it was like, felt like how awesome that I can buy the food that I'm picking out. I'm being choiceful so that I'm not overspending, but that's a choice. I get to do that. And it really, like, I could feel the tension unwinding around it for me. And then there was two other like key things that were massive parts of my own money story, my own relationship to money story. And one of them, again, has to do with my now husband, who, we love to ride bikes. We've always loved to ride bikes. At the time we met, I was riding this old aluminum framed stock bike that I got in my early 20s. And I didn't have money for another bike at that time. And I remember he found on Craigslist, down here in the States, he found it was a Trek Madone, carbon fiber bike that someone had like barely ridden, and they were selling it because they had a fire sale. They were getting rid of everything to, I don't know, some massive event in his life. And we went to go look at it, and I was like, it fit me to a T. It was so racy and awesome. And I was like, I can't. It was $1,200 is what he was selling it for. I was like, I can't do it. And my husband, or he was not my husband at the time. He was like, you know what? I don't want to undermine you, but I would like to buy this bike for you. And I thought about it, and we rode home, left the bike at the guy's house. We rode home, and I had this like moment of conviction. It was like both terrifying and so empowering. I was like, thank you for being willing to do that, but you don't need to. And it's not because I didn't want the gift from him. It was because there was this moment of clarity of like, I'm not going to need it, because I'm like, things are just about to turn for me. And so I dug into my savings a little more, and I bought the bike. And every time I rode that bike for the next many months while my business was really starting to turn, I was like, this is the sign. Like, this is the sign that it's turning. Like, I can feel it. And it was my sign to myself that I 100% believed in my capacity to follow my vision and create something really worthwhile and that could sustain me.
I love that story. And one of the things that, just to kind of unpack it a little bit more, Kristin, is that it's interesting that there's, of course, the phrase that, it's not the goal, it's who you have to become to achieve the goal. And, really, when you started to shift your relationship with money, and you were doing, whatever affirmation you might be doing, and looking after your books once a month, and doing all the things that you were doing around money, a lot of people hear that and go, yeah, what, am I just going to sit there and, hum and stuff's going to show up? There's a story around it, and it really isn't that. And you actually articulated it very well, is that it's not that you changed, nothing else changed. You changed how you held space, how you opened up. Your conversations were less negative, less defensive when it came to making money decisions. To your point, you were grateful. You understood that, yeah, I can't have it all, but I'm ever proud of the fact and happy that I can have what I have.